Are you looking for a narrow evergreen tree to create a privacy hedge or winter interest in your landscape? Well, I've got you covered. In this video, I'm going to share 16 narrow evergreen trees along with their growing zone, their size, their growth rate. These tall and narrow beauties can fit into even the smallest of yards. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy and I'm from prettypurpledoor.com, where I help home gardeners create landscapes that are uniquely you. Finding the right tree for any size yard is always a big decision, but when you're dealing with a small yard and you're looking for year-round interest or privacy, it gets a lot harder. You may wonder why you should choose an evergreen tree versus a pretty flowering deciduous tree. It can be really tempting. I like to use these photos as an example of why you may choose an evergreen. This is a home that's in my neighborhood with some very pretty hydrangeas along their foundation. This property looks so nice in September and October as shown in the top photo, but the rest of the year it just kind of looks blah like in the bottom photo. And I see this so often, which is why I've created a course to help homeowners design a landscape that will look great in all 4 seasons, not just for a few weeks. It's called Design Your 4-Season Garden. If you want to check it out, I'll leave a link for it in the description below. But back to my point, there are many beautiful deciduous trees and shrubs, but deciduous trees will create privacy during the warmer months with their foliage, although they can have interesting bark and other kinds of structure that can create winter interest. Because they lose their leaves, they can leave your property wide open in the colder months of the year. This concept works for both trees and shrubs in your landscape. Deciduous trees and shrubs look great while they're blooming, but they can kind of look sad in the winter without their foliage. But evergreens will stay green all year round. They can also provide a beautiful backdrop for your other plants and shrubs in your landscape. Not to mention making your house feel a lot less naked in the winter. That's why I love evergreens so much and why I try to make everyone else love them as much as I do. And here's a photo of my backyard, which is a fairly small yard, and I've been able to fit a lot of trees into my landscape. When I say a lot, I mean 50 trees. When I say my property is small, I mean that the dimensions are 125 feet by 70 feet, just for a reference. So if I can fit over 50 trees, I think that you can find room for at least 2 or 3. The row of trees in this photo in the background, this is my backyard in the late fall, and those are emerald green arborvitaes. So I'm going to talk about those first. These are my favorite evergreen narrow tree for privacy. They grow in zones 3 to 8 in full sun, and they reach about 12 to 15 feet high and 3 to 4 feet wide. Their growth rate is slow to moderate. I'd say 10 to 12 inches per year of growth they put out. These emerald greens line my property in my backyard. They look beautiful and they create the privacy that I want. I know many people either love or hate this tree, and I'm clearly in the love category. What I like most about the emerald green is that it's a shimmering bright green color, especially when the light hits the tree. It just glows. In the winter, the snow will set on top of the branches and the foliage, and it just looks so graceful and peaceful. There are some cons though. Arborvitaes in general, they can be finicky in some climates. They are also susceptible to bagworms, deer foraging, and several other pests and diseases. So it's best to be aware of that before you plant it. The best advice that I can give you is to take a drive around in your local area. If you don't see other emerald green arborvitae trees that are thriving, or the ones that you do see don't look so hot, you may want to choose another tree from this 16 that I'm going to go over. Otherwise, it's a beautiful tree that I personally have and I personally love, and I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever. Next is a lesser known variety of arborvitae called the Forever Goldie arborvitae. This grows in zones 3 to 8 in full sun. It gets about 12 feet high and 3 to 4 feet wide. The growth rate is moderate, about 1 foot or a little more of new growth per year. And Forever Goldie is different from emerald green because it has a super bright green foliage that's tinged with a yellow color. So it's a real standout in the landscape. You're gonna love how its foliage turns what I like to say is gold with the cold. The arborvitae's soft foliage and the upright pyramidal stature can also stand alone as a focal point on your property. So if you're not looking to create a privacy hedge, but you want to create a focal point, you may want to try something like this Forever Goldie arborvitae. Next is the green giant arborvitae, which grows in zones 5 to 7. It grows in full sun, 2-part shade, so a little bit more shade tolerant than the other arborvitaes, but it does get very tall, about 30 to 50 feet high and then about 10 to 12 feet wide. The thing about the green giant arborvitae is that it grows really, really fast compared to other. It could put on as much as 3 feet a year until its maturity. So it's a much faster growing evergreen tree, and it makes it a great option for screening a lot of space very quickly. And it's got this dense foliage that's a richer, darker green, and in the fall it will darken or bronze, and it gets kind of almost like a coppery color in the winter. I have 3 of these in my yard, and while I find them to be a little bit shaggier or looser structure than the emerald greens, I think they're really great, and they almost give a more casual feel to the landscape. Another arborvitae. Don't worry, I'm not going to just talk about arborvitaes. I have some other awesome ones coming up. Emerald Tower arborvitae grows in zones 5 to 9, and it's good in full sun, and it'll get about 25 to 30 feet high and 6 to 8 feet wide. These are just estimates, so it's a newer, lesser known variety. I've included this one just because it's taller than the emerald green arborvitae, but it's narrower than some of the cedars or the green giant. So it fits into like a little sweet spot there. It's a very fast grower. It can put on 3 feet a year, and in late winter, the foliage darkens very much on this tree to a brown or sometimes almost like a forest green color. This is kind of a rare arborvitae. It's created by a particular nursery online, so it may be difficult to find locally. I've also seen another variety. It's called Tiny Tower arborvitae, and that appears to be a pretty similar size and specs, although a bit slower of a growth rate than this one. So if you can't find Emerald Tower, you may want to look at Tiny Tower. Next up is Excelsa Cedar, and this grows in zones 5 to 9 in part sun to full sun. It gets about 30 to 35 feet high and 12 to 15 feet wide, so it's a bit wider than some of the others on this list. Growth rate is moderate to fast, about 2 to 3 feet per year once it's established, depending on your particular growing condition. This is a beautiful privacy tree. It's grown in both a natural and a hedged form, so Excelsas are very natural looking and they have a really good smell. They're a cedar tree, so if you can just imagine what that smells like. This is a great tree when an arborvitae is just a bit too small and you need a height-controlled screening tree, like maybe if you're looking for privacy from a neighbor who has a higher deck or a pool or a second story. Something like the Excelsa Cedar that's a bit taller could help you out there. Next is the Golden Horizon Deodar Cedar. Deodar Cedar, I don't know how to say that. It grows in zones 6 to 8 in full sun, and it gets about 20 feet high and 6 feet wide. The growth rate on this one is moderate, about 12 inches per year. It's got a really prominent central leader and yellow spring growth. It reminds me a little bit of the Forever Goldie arborvitae. Its new foliage is bright yellow before it turns a yellow-green in the summer. So the photo that you're seeing here is probably in very early spring when it's all new growth. It grows well if your summers are dry and your winters are cool and wet, and it prefers a slightly acidic soil, so just keep that in mind. Next is the Slender Hinoki Cypress. This grows in zones 4 to 8 in full sun. It gets about 8 to 12 feet high and 4 to 5 feet wide. The growth rate on Hinoki Cypress, I have not the slender version, I just have a regular Hinoki Cypress. They're slow growers. I'd say 6 to 8 inches of new growth per year. The slender, it's also called gracillus. It's got these graceful, really cool arching branches, and it's sort of got a Japanese vibe. I believe it is from Japan, but the tiny needles are deep green and they have like a reddish tinge to them with the new growth. And in 10 years, this tree gets to about 8 feet tall. It will eventually grow to 15 to 25 feet high and about 5 feet wide at maturity. But just keep that in mind that a lot of times when you're shopping for trees online, it's going to show you the height and the width of the tree at 10 years. So I'm trying to kind of include, yeah, it'll be about 8 feet tall in 10 years, but eventually it could get to 15 to 25. So it will stay on the smaller side, and then over time it will get a lot taller. Next up is Leyland Cypress. This is another very common tree. It grows in zone 6 to 10 in full sun. At maturity, it can get up to 40 to 60 feet high and 20 to 25 feet wide. So it is a monster tree. It gets very big. They grow fast, 3 to 5 feet per year. So awesome for screening if you're trying to block something and you can't wait. But at the same time, that type of growth and the size that this tree gets, it makes it sort of not so great for smaller landscapes. Regardless of that, it is America's most planted privacy tree, and that's for a good reason. It can be grown in both a natural form or you can trim it into a hedge form. And it's known for this iconic silhouette, and it boasts this feathery, soft, lush foliage. There's no prickly needles or anything on this tree, and it's also really drought tolerant once it's established, so that's also a plus for this particular tree, Leyland Cypress. A variety of Leyland Cypress that you may not have seen before is called Goldie, and this grows in zones 5 to 9 in full sun. It gets about 35 feet high and 15 feet wide. It's got a slower growth rate than the Leyland Cypress. It's about 2 feet per year for the first 10 years or so, and then the growth rate will slow down to about a foot per year. It matures to about half the size of the regular Leyland Cypress. Goldie has beautiful golden foliage. It makes a stunning hedge, or even as a specimen tree or a focal point. The yellow color of this tree is concentrated sort of at the tips of the branches. So the inside is like a darker green, and then the outside is this bright yellow green. It almost gives it this two-toned effect, and it gives the tree a lot of depth, especially if there's light and shadow play. It's also faster growing than emerald green, but not as fast growing as Leyland Cypress. So again, it's hitting that sweet spot in between. Well, it'll get that bright yellow green color if it's in full sun. So the more sun it receives, the more it'll look that bright yellow. They are also more colorful in the summer than in the winter. In the winter, they lose much of their yellow color. This is a newer variety of cypress, of Leyland Cypress, Goldie, so the sizes, just keep in mind that those are estimates, and it hasn't been around really long enough for most people to know exactly how tall or wide it's going to get, but the photo, you can see that it is pretty mature in that photo. Next up is Moonglow Juniper, and this is a beautiful plant. I love junipers. This grows in zones 3 to 7 in full sun. It gets about 20 feet high and about 8 feet wide. It has a really fast growth rate, which is nice at 2 feet per year. And Moonglow is a really compact, and it's got this really cool, attractive grayish green foliage all year round. And I've seen pictures of this where it looks more on the bluer side and more on the greener side, so I think it probably depends on how much sun this plant is getting as well. The gray-green foliage will reflect light under a strong moonlight, which is where it gets its name of the Moonglow. So that's a pretty cool fact. It's a neat tree. Next up is Blue Arrow Juniper. This grows in zones 4 to 8 in part sun to full sun. It gets 16 to 20 feet high and 2 to 4 feet wide, so just a bit less than the Moonglow, a little shorter. And it's got this powdery blue foliage, but like I said, I think in like more of a shade or part shade, it won't get that blue. So I've included 2 photos, one where it looks brilliant blue. I see this photo online all the time, and I'm not 100% sure if it really gets that blue, so I've included another one from Washington State University that's probably a more realistic look at this. And here we have Skyrocket Juniper, which is zones 4 to 9, grows in full sun, 15 to 20 feet high and 2 to 3 feet wide. It's got a moderate growth rate. It can grow over 12 inches a year, but it's sort of on the slow to moderate. Skyrocket fits into like difficult places, like a narrow side yard between homes, and planting multiples of it can create a really good windbreak in both hot and cold climates. So that's what it's good for. And I've seen it used a lot in these like mixed conifer gardens. It looks really cool mixed into that because it's just got such a different color and form than a lot of other evergreens. Next up is Pencil Point. This is a very popular juniper, grows in zones 3 to 8, so it's fairly cold tolerant, like full sun to part sun, or even shade, which is hard to find. So this might be one to keep on your list. It's a very small, it only gets about 6 feet high and 1 feet wide, but it's a very slow growing tree. It gets about 1 to 6 inches of growth per year. So if you're going to buy this and you're looking for that wow factor right away, you might need to spend a little bit more money to get one that's a bit more mature, just because it does grow so slowly. It has this beautiful bluish green foliage. It shimmers in the sun. It's a great choice for a slender garden where space is limited. I've seen them used a lot, sort of flanking entryways and things like that. It likes well-drained soil, and despite its size, this is a very strong evergreen. It's a tough tree. It's drought tolerant. It's cold hardy. And it can tolerate a lot of conditions that other trees may be a little bit more finicky about. So this is a great all-around plant for any size landscape. Next up is Sky Pencil Holly. It's another great choice for really small gardens. Grows in zones 5 to 9 in full to part sun, and this one gets about 8 to 10 feet high and about 2 feet wide. Typically, these smaller evergreens will have a slower growth rate than the larger ones. It's saying low to moderate, and it's about 10 to 12 inches per year, so it doesn't grow that slow. It's not too bad considering its size. I like to say it grows skyward naturally without the need for trimming or pruning in any way. It just naturally grows like that. And because it's only 2 feet high and 8 to 10 feet wide, it almost looks to me like an exclamation point. So it can be a really cool focal point for your garden and just add some vertical interest in a place where you don't have much space to do so. Next up is the Columnar Japanese Plum Yew. This grows in zones 5 to 9 in part sun to shade. So it doesn't like the sun, so that's another rarity here. And it gets about 6 feet wide at maturity and about 10 feet high, but it's almost like a base shape. So near the bottom, it won't be 6 feet wide. It'll be 6 feet wide near the top. So you still can fit it into a smaller landscape. It grows slow, 6 to 8 inches per year, but it's a great evergreen because of its size. It's interesting because in the spring, the new growth is actually a chartreuse, like a very bright green color, and then it later changes to this glossy dark green foliage. The yew is fairly deer resistant, and it can tolerate these shade situations. So those are some narrow evergreen trees that you can try out in your landscape, and I just wanted to put a little warning in here about fast growing trees. You hear this all the time. Which privacy hedge, which plant will grow the fastest? I want the fastest growing privacy screen that's possible. So are fast growing trees really the best option for you? The growth rate shouldn't be the only criteria that you are basing your decision on. A lot of times fast growing trees are weaker than slower growing trees. They're also more prone to disease, and pretty much always, a fast growing tree will have a shorter lifespan than one that grows at a slow to moderate rate. So they can often have shallow or a weak root system because they're growing so fast, and that can cause them to falling over in high winds or storm conditions. You can't have everything, a perfect tree that grows fast and gets tall and gets like you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons there. And I see so many people looking at these fast growing trees and thinking they're the solution, where it may be better for you to actually temporarily use some sort of different screening as a slower growing evergreen will fill in. There are things that you can do in the interim while your tree is still growing in, and I'll provide a link to some other privacy ideas in the description below so that you can take a look at some other privacy options that aren't necessarily trees. So if you liked this video, you'd probably also like my video about other narrow trees, and that includes some evergreens, but not necessarily all evergreens. Those trees are great options too for small yards, and they can create amazing focal points in your landscape. So I'm going to leave a link to that video right here for you right now, and I'll see you over there.